You ready? You're listening to the Real Pineapple Podcast Network. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, theys, and gays. This is the Real Pineapple. This is your humble host, Hunter, here. I hope you're well. I hope you're safe and all that fun stuff. I'm really excited today, y'all. I've got another interview for y'all. Yeah, staying busy. Talking about the new documentary, Our Dad Danielle. I've got the director of the film and the star of the film. I have S.E. King, and I have Danielle Healy. Did I say it right? Healy or the
Yep.
Haley?
Healy,
Healy.
Healy,
All
Healy.
right, boom. Um, Ladies, thank you so much for making the time. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you so much. I'll be a little better after next week once uh yeah,
Yep.
once Kamala wins. But
Oh my gosh, yes.
um
Yes.
but you know, speaking of that, I'll just jump in here. So Danielle, as someone who lived in Austin for like a decade, I know like that's one of the few kind of liberal bastions in a state that quite frankly confuses me. And and um hearing you talk about coming out and transitioning is incredibly powerful, and I appreciate so much the way that SE you were able to capture that, and Danielle for your unapologetic truth. So thank you to both of you for that. Um how is it being in Texas going through all that? Like just because I know myself when I moved, that would have been like 20, God, what would that been? 2012, 2012, 2013. It was starting to get worse, quite frankly. And so, yeah, how do you, being a lawyer, how do you kind of navigate that along with being a trans woman?
Um, it's it's gotten worse over the years, especially now. It's a very oppressive atmosphere for trans people. I think all LGBT people, and also I think even other minorities are feeling the weight of this oppression. Um, when I say we're, the trans community especially, is being demonized
Yeah.
beyond any boundaries that could possibly be acceptable or tied to any realistic issue. I mean, you have this whole thing about trans girls playing sports, and I think I saw a study not too long ago that applied to roughly about 60 or 70 kids in the United States.
Wow.
So yeah, you probably have 20 commercials for every trans kid playing sports. And in
Mm,
Texas, the only um, time that became an issue was a trans boy who was forced to wrestle in a female wrestling competition because he had been born a girl, and that made the girls very, very uncomfortable and unhappy. Um, so here it was the opposite, and that was a trans boy who was playing in a girls' sport by the requirements of the Texas government because he had wanted to wrestle with the boys. So this whole thing is really just, in my mind, persecution, and it's the kind of persecution you see historically, where politicians seize on a little known, politically powerless group that that don't really have a lot of education out there about what who they are and why they're in that situation, and they exploit it. And nobody wants to be trans to begin with. I mean, I think every documentary I've ever seen where a trans person is interviewed, it comes out that that person didn't want to be trans, and
yeah.
typically they fought it. And I fought it for decades with every type of tool I could muster between medicine, psychiatry, religion, and yet I finally had to deal with it.
Well, especially for the
So
older generations. I
yeah,
think older generations, obviously, that's different, but I think absolutely for the older generations, your story absolutely is very, very true.
right. Oh yeah, and now the resources are a little bit better,
Yeah.
but in Texas they're being withdrawn, and
Yeah.
that's part of this bizarre turn of society in certain states where it's like we want to go back to the 40s or the 50s and eliminate abortion, eliminate contraception. J.D. Vance at his most extreme wants to eliminate divorce, um, and that's
Yeah.
just incredible that you have people advocating for these measures that all good reason and common sense have prevailed over the years, and now we want to dial it back. It's hard being in that environment, even though I have a job, a very good job, I have a profession, I'm able to help other people, and do things like help with name changes and asylum applications and class action lawsuit that I represented, um, trans women who were in the Texas Department of Corrections. You know, even I'm who have a lot of things going for me that most trans people don't have going for them, feel the oppression, feel the eyes burrowing into me, feel the government throwing its weight against me.
Yeah.
I guess follow up to that. Because, as someone who's always trying to, use this platform, use other things at my disposal to be a better ally. I think the thing that I found so fascinating, I was so happy, SC, that you brought this up, was the transgender like um the bathroom thing. Because honestly, okay, so um one of the things about that just drives me nuts is that that's such a boogeyman, like that's such a straw hat argument. Like that's one of those things where I'm like, why would this be an issue? Like there's no way this would be this would be an issue. And to Danielle's point, we really find that trans kids are the ones who need more protection from people than the other way around.
Absolutely.
And I think what I find so interesting and quite frankly disturbing about Texas is how the church culture is so ingrained in there. And with all the I'll be nice today, with all the scandals that have followed churches for decades
Yeah.
versus the trans bathroom argument where that's so not an issue and there's no evidence to even support that would be an issue.
Yeah.
Um Obviously, I see you feel certain ways about these things, and I always find it interesting how a director is able to walk that line of not making it feel like a slant, but just presenting the information. But
Mhm.
as this documentary goes on, and you hear more Daniel's story, like you just you feel a certain way, obviously. But how do you kind of strike that balance between not, keeping it on the straight and narrow and not falling too much?
Sure. You mean not falling too much into like the politicalness of it all?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. I mean, the thing is like it's really hard to talk about these things and not want to just scream and and
I did that
and
at multiple points during the film, by the way.
yeah. So there were certain things that we absolutely didn't want to shy away from, but ultimately this story is very much about Danielle, who's a fascinating, dynamic woman, and her world, which we obviously could not have planned and anticipated. The story with Sasha. We also, of course, didn't think we would meet Jerry, one of Danielle's friends. So we were constantly kind of trying to just be very open with the reality of Danielle's life. Her life just happens to be very dynamic and filled with some really interesting, fascinating women, and her pro bono work is incredible. And thank God that happened for Sasha. But
Yeah,
ultimately,
absolutely.
the goal was if we present this as humanistic as possible, without getting too much in the weeds of all of, there's so much politically we could have talked about. But really this story was a human story, and it was a story about Danielle and her world, her family. And so we wanted to call attention to some of the things that we absolutely like we're just talking about every day, right? Because Danielle's a really bright woman. We were talking about the bathroom bill, like she talked about it a lot. So it felt weird not to include it, but we didn't want to dwell too much on that. We wanted to kind of present that, let the audience decide how they feel about it, and then get back to these other access points, which were obviously Danielle's love of her family, fighting for her career, fighting just to be able to be authentic. And obviously just being LGBTQ is as a political statement in itself, right? I mean, so that the goal was to really focus on presenting her life, and then some of these issues that and I also want to say this, I didn't want to give a lot of time to fucking Trump at
Fair.
all.
Fair.
And that was intentional. And I hate that I just said his name, but I did. But
I I get it. Trust me.
you know how we feel, right?
Yeah.
So like some of these things needed to be addressed, but again, I just didn't want to give too much airtime to these people, because ultimately the more important thing was Danielle's story and how her life was unfolding.
Well said. Danielle, you have for me one of my favorite lines in anything all year, and I've been watching an ungodly amount of film this year, even for me. You said that diversity is meaningless without inclusion. And when you said that, I was like, oh my God. I was like, thank you. Someone fucking gets it. And I I cannot stress enough how much when you said that, I was like, oh, if I didn't like you before. Um
Honestly, you just saying that gave me chills. It's one of my favorite lines in the film too. It is.
yeah, that made me so happy.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that aspect because I mean, the work you're doing now. I mean, so being a lawyer in Texas, especially, I'm like, oh God, I can only imagine the sort of cases that you're dealing with. Just the arguments I would have when I was there. I was like, oh my God, I would. So, so, so talk to me about like that process now because obviously you do talk about in the documentary about how you were taking on these like high-end cases before you transition, but now you are doing more like pro bono work and stuff like that. So how has your work changed like for the worse for the better, would you say, since you transitioned?
Well, I lost really almost my entire book of business, so to speak, when I transitioned.
Wow.
I somehow thought that transitioning in Texas in the age of Trump would be a great business plan. I was wrong. I just got that one completely wrong.
Yeah, swing and a miss.
So, I then figured out that people who don't have any money are much less picky about their lawyers than people who do have money.
True.
So I started doing a lot of pro bono work for all kinds of people, and especially uh, for asylees who are seeking refugee status here or asylum status here because they were victims of violence and potentially face death in their home countries. I've represented you know a dozen say people in asylum proceedings. Most of them are LGBTQ, some of them are trans, and some are straight cisgender people. But the one thing in common that they all have is that they fled the countries that they came from after being victimized by violence and under threat of being murdered. Um, People think that there's this horde of immigrants who are just trying to come here to take away their jobs, overrun their schools, overrun their neighborhoods. And in fact, a lot of these people are from societies and countries that are governed by violence and have been the victims of violence and persecution, or have been so badly victimized in terms of their ability just to live in an environment that the government's made into a war zone. They don't want to come here per se. They flee to this country.
Yeah.
And that's what asylum's about. It's about giving a safe haven to people who are fleeing persecution and violence. So, you know, I find that very rewarding, but it's also very scary because,
Yeah.
if you lose, your person's going back to that environment. And
Mm.
fortunately, I've not lost one yet,
Hell
but
yeah.
I know that day will come, and that's really hard to cope with. And I've had some young lawyers who were working with me who just really ultimately dropped out of the process because they couldn't handle the stress of knowing that if their work didn't come to a successful conclusion, someone was potentially going to die. Um, and then I've also advocated, against the bathroom bill. The bathroom bill was very personal to me because if it had been enforced in, say, Texas state courthouses, part of my practice is in Texas state court. Where am I going to have to go to the bathroom? I
Mm.
mean, if I'm in court all day, I have to use the bathroom just like everyone else.
Yeah.
And the fallacy of that is that every police organization was against that bill because what happens is that trans people are the ones who get beaten up and hurt and harmed and victimized by violence in the restroom. And there is no record of a trans person ever doing that to someone in a bathroom.
No.
So, you're making the victims into the evildoers when in fact you're not addressing any problem at all. It's a solution in search of a problem. And
Mm.
it
Wow.
would have
Okay.
personally affected me if it had been enacted into law. So, I came out hard against that bill and testified against it and tried to organize against it. Um, and I've also did a class action with the American Civil Liberties Union on behalf of trans women who were in Texas prisons. Really, it was just the simplest thing, and that is that they be allowed to wear appropriate undergarments.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's it. And how trivial to me or to you that sounds that you get to wear your underwear
Yeah.
that matches the way you think and feel and are. And maybe you're picking between boxer shorts and briefs, and these folks are really being dehumanized because they're not allowed to wear appropriate underwear. Whether they buy it, whether it's provided for them. I mean, it's just bizarre, absolutely bizarre. That's happened, but it's happening, and it happens for no good reason, no good purpose. So, I try to do what I can, but I'm one crippled old lady. I can only do so much, and we need help. And I'm afraid that if this election goes the wrong way at the national level, we'll lose our federal safety net. And it's already gotten some holes punched in it through some of the judges that Trump has nominated and put on the bench in these remote places like Amarillo, where the right wing has flocked to file cases that no one ever thought could be filed in this day and age.
Yeah. SC, I'll throw it back to you. I love the beginning of this documentary, how you went like, oh yeah, we're gonna make this into like a movie, and then you show that footage and you're like, well, actually, we decided, decided to uh to pivot. Um, given the material that I actually saw at the beginning that I thought was fun, is a trans comedy or an LGBTQ comedy, is that something you'd like to explore potentially down the road?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, my background is in comedy. I always wanted to be a writer director, but I purposely went to Chicago to study under like the greats at the Second City, Annoyance,
Oh,
Improv
nice. Let's
Olympic,
go.
where I
Yeah.
did improv and stand up. A lot of that for me at the time, I was still closeted. And so it was really for me free therapy, if I'm being honest. I was really
Okay.
drawn to that because I could get out all these characters and all my frustration on the stage and also kind of hide behind characters. And that was a really wonderful experience. But my degrees in radio, TV, film, and then my background's comedy. So ultimately, and Danielle and I have talked about this, we would love to work on something again that's like a narrative, that's a comedy, because
Nice.
Danielle also loves comedy, and that's part of the reason why there's moments of comedy infused throughout the film, because comedy, humor is such a profound way to heal and to also shine a spotlight on things that might be a little bit complicated or hard to talk about. And so I personally find so much power and healing through comedy. And it was really important to have those moments where we could explore some jokes and some fun throughout the film. But yeah, we definitely will do that in the future. I definitely will. And I'd like to do something again with Danielle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I tried my hand at stand up at
That's
open
right.
mic for about a year and a half, and I tried writing that little web series because there are a lot of you know funny little things that come up in transition and living your life as a trans person that would make for a good comedy. And I think it would also make for a comedy that has both truth and humor in it. So I think it'd be a great idea. Um, I don't think you need to have an intense drama like Transparent was in order
Mhm.
to deliver education or message or enlighten people about trans stuff. I mean, I think that you know trans people are just like other people, and that's my main message here. Trans people are no different from everybody else. Funny things happen to them. They do funny things inadvertently. They have missteps. They have accidents. They say things that are stupid. They say things that are insightful. It's just part of being human, and trans people are just people.
Yeah.
I do want to say something. I'm sorry to just add. So Danielle did start doing stand up and it was really incredible and it was hard because there was aspects of that in one of the versions of the film, but because once the Sasha stuff really developed and we were worried about time and we were worried, pacing so important in
Absolutely.
when you're editing um and the pacing was something I was obsessed over. And so I went back and forth with including the stand up because it was so good and it was so cool. And we're actually going to do something with it to promote the movie. We're going to my wife and I who edited the film with me and was one of the main editors and then also was the producer. We have so much great footage that we ended up not using, so we are actually going to take some of her stand up and use it to promote the film.
Oh,
But
hell yeah.
it was so cool and awesome to see Danielle do that. Like, and the crowd's reactions were always so fascinating too. And we had some of it at the end of the movie, but I can't remember now if that's still the case during the credits. I'm brain dead. But long story short, that stand up will find life. It'll find life.
Okay. Last question I
And,
have for
and
y'all because
you know,
I'm
and it's
Oh, sorry.
no, good, go ahead, Dan.
no, I was just gonna say, look, I mean, there have just been funny things that have happened to me, and I can see different reactions between the men and the women in the audience.
Yeah.
Um, and as living as a woman, you know, I can see, the young women in the legal profession thinking, oh, we've made it now, we're equal, and I'm like, not quite.
Yeah.
That that
so,
statement you
so
made,
there are
yeah.
there are a lot to learn.
What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Oh, my bad. I was just gonna say real quick
But
when you
I
talk
have
about
gotten
that
a lot
dog,
of my
yeah.
practice back too. So there is hope.
Last question I have for y'all. For people who aren't members of the LGBTQ community, but are allies of it, um, as things stand where they stand, what can we do? Like, I know it's such a loaded question, but like, what can we do, big, small, middle? What can we do to go ahead and support y'all like on a bigger, like how can we do that? Like, again, I know that's a loaded question, but I'll SC, I'll ask you first. But
Sure.
yeah,
Thanks. No, I'm okay. Um, no, I mean, I think, look, like one of the things we've talked about, I don't know what the percentage is now, but it's somewhere around like say 60% at least of Americans haven't knowingly met a trans person, they say, right? So that's a huge percentage of our country that doesn't even have they a trans friend, never met knowingly met a trans person. So they really have no idea what it even means to be trans, and the humanistic part of it is so removed because it's so easy to vilify it when you don't know someone, when you haven't met someone in person. Imaginations and fear-based people, the narratives they can create in their head, and especially if there's watching this crazy propaganda, it's because they haven't actually met a trans person. This film is really trying to just introduce all people to a trans person, especially people who've never met a trans person,
yeah,
with a simple point that of course trans people are just people. They're beautiful, loving human people who have insecurities and faults, but also beauty and strength, and they're just like everybody else. And the more we can just humanize them, because they don't need to be normalized, they're normal, they need to be humanized. And so the more we can share honest stories that are beautiful and nuanced, that live in the gray and don't try to do silly stereotypes, that's where the power is.
well said. Danielle, what about you?
I think that what an ally can do the most is to show acceptance for the trans and LGBTQ people in their life to other people. It's remarkable how many people I've met who have a trans relative. Well, if people would speak up and say, I have a trans nephew, I have a trans niece, I have a trans uncle, I have a trans aunt, and not, parade that around or make that, the caption of your photograph, but at least, share that with people so that it's normalized, and it's not normalized in the sense that, oh, I'm going to choose to be trans. No one chooses to be trans. being
Yeah,
being trans is not a choice. um but being supportive of people who are trans, who are gay, by showing your support for them directly to them and also to others. And when you're in a conversation, um you you just don't tolerate people talking about it. I mean, look, one time, one of my relatives who lives in deep, deep East Texas, an older person, was at my house and was watching a football game and yelled out the N word. And I immediately turned around and just said, we do not use that language ever, especially not in my house.
Good.
yeah,
And he was shocked. He was shocked at the strength of my reaction. And my kids were surprised too, because I very rarely yelled. So, that was me in a house full of white people saying, look, this is totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
You're not going to demonize people. You're not going to do that. You don't use that kind of language. Well, when you hear people demonize gays, when you hear people demonize trans, stand up and say, look, I'm not going to tolerate that.
yeah,
It's not true. It's not helpful to anyone. It's harmful to a lot of people. Just I won't listen to it. I
Yeah.
won't be part of that conversation to demonize trans people, and just be very supportive of people when they come out. Coming out as a trans person is incredibly difficult because of the persecution, because of the oppression, and because nobody wants to embrace the fact that they're trans.
yeah,
And when little kids come out, Well, they're not coming out. They're little kids. They're
Yeah.
just doing stuff because, they're going to the bathroom, they're eating, they're walking around, they're running. Being who they are is just who they are.
Well said. Um, I will say in closing that as a cis straight man, I think what's so frustrating is you don't always need to understand everything to support it. If
Right.
someone says that they're trans and that's what makes like I love how you said June 17th, 2017 you started living for yourself. Like
Yeah.
that just made me cry so hard and I'm so happy you're able to find that piece. Even though it was a little later in life. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so happy I got a chance to watch this documentary, and I'm so happy and thankful for both of you for making the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it, and
You were so lovely. Thank you for that. That's so
oh,
sweet.
Very
Thank
kind.
you. That
thank
means
you.
a lot so
I
much.
appreciate that. If I could please get both of you to tell everyone where they can find you on socials, where they can watch the film before I let you go. Danielle, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, the main place that I know of is our website, which is www.ourdaddanielle.com. And I will turn it over to Sarah for all of the other information that anyone under 60 knows how to use.
Oh man.
No pressure.
Yeah, so Danielle mentioned the website. We also have an Instagram, it's Our Dad Danielle, and we have a Facebook, which is also Our Dad Danielle. And those are, I think, the main ones. Did I miss one? I don't think so. But yeah, those are the main ones.
All
But
right.
thank you so much.
And
No,
isn't
so,
the movie coming out
Oh, thank you.
soon?
Gosh.
That's a big
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
How to
that's
how to see the movie.
oh God, very important. Thank you. This is why we keep Danielle
yep,
around.
nice
Uh,
save.
Yeah, worldwide, it's coming out November 1st. There's a pre-order link now that's available for Apple TV, and pre-order links are really important for thoroughly independent films like ours because the more folks who do a pre-order link, the more we might populate like the front part of Apple TV and maybe might be listed for like LGBTQ docs, and that's really helpful for us because we don't have a big marketing budget. So pre-order link for Apple TV, you can easily find it if you search Apple TV and Our Dad Danielle. And then the movie comes out worldwide on streaming November 1st.
Perfect. I will be sharing my review of this on the first, along with this interview. But SC Danielle, thank you so much again for taking the time. I hope the documentary, I hope everyone watches it. And seriously, thank you again so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Us too. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
anytime, you take
Bye.
care.
Okay, you too.